You can see here a transgender golfer wins a women's tournament in Australia. Score another victory for the toxic male patriarchy. Biological male named Brianna Gills, who's been competing as a woman on the women's circuit in Australia for the past 8 years, which I'm surprised. 8 years ago, the propaganda was in full swing, so I'm surprised that he was able to compete against women that long ago. But nonetheless, that's reality. He scored his first victory against women. The best woman, who I believe deserved to win the tournament, was not awarded the tournament victory. So the toxic male patriarchy takes another victory away, snatches it from the jaws of victory from another woman. Be who you want to be. That's totally cool. Be whoever you imagine. You have an imaginary friend and think you're that friend. That's freedom. You're absolutely welcome to do it. But when you try to coerce and intimidate other people into making their objective reality based on your imagination, we got a problem.
And that's where I sit, and that's where my issue lies. I know not a lot of people are into the golf world. It's not as popular as football or basketball, but the issue is if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere else. When this is your job and your livelihood, that when it comes to men, I think y'all should stay out of our sports. Being competitive is already hard enough. There's this such thing called Q school, which is qualifying school. You have to have a certain amount of wins and a certain amount of top 10 finishes, etc., to even qualify to be able to play on a professional tour. There have been women who go into Q school who literally lose by one stroke, and then they have to literally start their whole entire career over, and qualifying school over. Like, you go through a whole season. You have like a couple hiccups, but you finally start pulling it together just to lose by one stroke and have to go through Q school all over again. That has been something that has killed many people's dreams and aspirations, because golf is also a very, very expensive sport. And I am one of 7 kids. I had one parent working. We are not affluent at all. Even how we were able to play golf was crazy. We would be buying stuff off of eBay, changing our own shafts, changing our own grips, reading books, watching content just to learn how to play and to get our skills better, because my parents couldn't afford to do anything else. So if this was my background and I'm playing against a transgender woman, I would be absolutely furious. This is one of the things I don't understand about feminism. We've always talked about equality and that men have the upper hand on everything, and yet a lot of feminists stand up for this. A lot of feminists say that trans women are women and that trans women have the same exact rights and everything as biological women do. But yet, these are still men. Where are they speaking up about this? In fact, like I said, I've seen plenty of them come forward and say, hey, this is actually great for women's sports. One of the things I will say too is a lot of these women who come out and talk about how this is great for sports, a lot of them are not athletes. I've heard women say, hey, well, sports is all about having fun. When you're playing cubby t-ball and like having junior golf camps, yeah, hanging out with your friends, that's fun. When you start getting into competitiveness, when you start having to pay for your tournaments, and golf tournaments are not cheap. They are not cheap whatsoever. They can easily be $100 a pop or more depending on how far along in your profession you go. Even in junior golf, we're talking about travel, we're talking about food, we're talking about the actual entry fee itself. And then depending on certain tournaments, there are cutoffs. If you do not qualify, you get a trunk slammer. You get sent home. When you have money on the line, at a certain point, it's about competing and it's about winning. Your friend's off the course, but when you're on the course, this is like war. I'm here to put my foot on your throat and not let off. That is what competition is. So when you have not only women saying that trans women are women and they should be allowed in women's sports, a lot of you guys have no skin in the game. A lot of you guys have not played sports. And if you did, y'all had a mindset of, I'm just here for fun. I'm just here for socialization. A lot of us were not there for socialization. When we got off, we were cool. We were chill. Hey, that's how we were. And that's just for women. I don't know how the dudes be getting down, but that's how I felt as a girl when I was playing.
So checking out this article from the New York Post, It says here after the victory that he received death threats, I guess, across major social media backlash. Hard to imagine why there's backlash. Death threats, that's not cool. That's 100% not cool. That's something only mentally ill people do. And therefore, the WPGA Tour of Australasia chief Karen Loon says it's the biggest win of her life. She just misgendered her. It's really sad that she can't celebrate that win.
Nothing's stopping you from celebrating that win, period. And this is getting me hot. Golf was a very racist, very elitist sport. Most sports, but golf specifically, there are stories of African American golfers talked about they went over to a hole to pick up their golf ball and there was fecal matter in it. Lee Trevino talks about how he had to deal with racism, and he's Latino, he's Mexican. That did not stop them from celebrating their wins. If anything, that pushed them to become better. So I'm not with the death threats. I'm not with the death threats. That's not okay. You should not be talking about offing somebody because they won a golf tournament. However, there are people historically who are still alive today who could tell you about wanting to celebrate a win after picking up a golf ball covered in fecal matter, after being called the N-word, all this stuff, and they were still able to celebrate it.
Some of the online criticism of Gill's win labeled the victory mental illness and accused her of taking away a women's spot in the championship win. Fact check true.
Which is true. Once again, when it comes to golf, there are cutoffs. So if you are playing a reasonable enough score, like let's say someone is at -5, and the cutoff is +1. That's kind of low, but the cutoff is +1. If you are the transgender person who's leading at -5, you set the precedent for where the cutoff place was. Crazy enough is before I play this, I wanted to see what the leaderboard was like. I can't find a leaderboard for this event. I could find the leaderboard from 2022, but not for this event. It did say that there was a playoff, though, at -6. It's something that I did read. So there was a playoff, but I don't know if he set the precedent for where the cutoff was. I honestly don't know. Qualifying, there's a cutoff based on score, but before you even get to that, there's the cutoff of how many people can actually participate. So yes, 100% a woman was overlooked for this guy to be able to play.
The director has explained that Gill, this golfer guy, had met all policy requirements for transgender athlete participation, and her participation had never caused a problem with the 300 other members of the organization. The requirements for participation include gender reassignment surgery, hormonal therapy for at least a year, and legal documents acknowledging gender reassignment. Hormonal therapy for at least a year. I mean, from just a common sense perspective. So if this guy, I don't know his age, but it looks old, let's say he's 50, he could have 49 years worth of male levels of testosterone going through his system, making his muscles bigger, stronger, bones denser, all competitive advantages in sports, not to mention the skeletal system of a man, which is biomechanically, on average, better at performing sports. But then just a hormonal alteration for a year's time, and we pretend major testosterone advantage over competitors. We just pretend that's not an issue. Cool, this only makes sense if we're willing to pretend like hell that these realities aren't part of reality.
The conversation about trans women in women's sports has oftentimes been, talked about in regards to contact sports and swimming recently. When it comes to golf, strength is a part of it, but it's not the only part of it. Golf is not necessarily a physical sport in terms of strength. Definitely, you can be strong, you could be long, and you could also be wrong. You can slice it off into the weeds. You have to have a certain level of technique when it comes to golf. However, when it comes to fast twitch muscles, the ability to be able to correct and everything like that in a swing, the golf swing happens within a couple seconds. So your brain has to be able to process and go through everything physically within a matter of milliseconds and couple of seconds. And just being like a degree or two off can determine if your golf ball is going to be in the weeds or if it's going to be down the middle of the fairway. When it comes to men, they have better fast twitch muscles and the things that you need in order to be a successful golfer. So 100%, even though this is a game that isn't always about strength, it does have a level of physicality that is something that men have an advantage over that women do not. Also, when it comes to the strength factor too, I am going to look up how long this course is, because the understanding of strength when it comes to women and men, professional golf tournaments for women I think are close to 6,100 yards per course. Men competitions, professional ones, we're talking close to 7,000. So almost an 1,000-yard difference between the two. So once again, you take a biological male, maybe only been on hormone blockers for a couple of years. Golf isn't all about strength, but that does play into it in terms of how far you can hit the ball. You can get on the green in one and putting for eagle while I'm still in the middle of the fairway trying to hit up and try to get for birdie or maybe struggling for par.
I genuinely wish him well. I hope he has a beautiful, happy life. I hope he's connected to his heart. I hope somehow the way he's living is on a path that's somehow beneficial for him. I don't know that it is. I kind of doubt it, but I hope, I wish him a lot of great health, happiness. And I also wish the women that he's competing against to have a fair competition, which means I certainly believe this person should be removed from the women's circuit. Obviously, there's a lot of wave right now. It's become now socially acceptable to stand up and want to protect women's sports. I think that's great. There's been a few year period where the masses were like intimidated into silence, just like I think the 300 other members of the WPGA in Australia are. I think it's important to protect women's sports, because not only is it protecting women's sports, I think it's protecting this precious thing called objective reality.
When it comes to this being Gil's first win, a lot of people might be like, well, this is their first win in 8 years of being on a professional circuit. Why does that matter? In order for you to get on a professional circuit, you had to go through qualifying school, and you could have beat out a woman to get onto the professional circuit, and that mess is hard. You can go through a full year of playing fairly decent, but if you're just one stroke off, meaning you hit the ball one more time than your competitors, you have to go through a whole entire year of going through qualifying school just so that way you can end up on a professional level. That's number one. Number two, just because this is their first win, I'm curious as to what their ranking is on this tour, as well as what has been their overall history in the sport in terms of, because, you know, they might have had a lot of top 10s. Being top 10 in a lot of sports isn't that big of a deal when it comes to tennis. Yeah, 100%. That's one of those ones. So I would be curious, maybe this is your first win in 8 years, but how many close finishes have you had? How many top 10 finishes have you had over the past 8 years? Also, when it comes to the money as well, which is another thing, and just in women's sports in general, there is a push to try to have, even in women's golf, more money. It's golf, so you have to have a lot of money, and a lot of times when it comes to your top 10 finishes, the purses that you get, it goes into your next tournament. We could talk about sponsorships. It's not going to a woman, it's going to this guy. I know a couple people who have gone and tried to play in U.S. amateurs, who have tried to qualify for the U.S. Women's Open. I do know someone who played in college at a very high level. I think she was at a D1 school. So once again, I know a lot of women who have worked their butts off, who we would be up at 0:00 in the morning, going to camps, driving to tournaments and seeing each other, having conversations about how we don't have the money to play in tournaments and how, you know, we got to do what we got to do. That same exact struggle and grind for how a lot of people attribute men as athletes. I see that in a lot of female golfers. It's unfortunate that it's already hard enough as it is, but to throw this into the mix, it just makes everything a lot worse and a lot harder. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, how you feel about this whole entire situation. If you've made it this far, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, because you know it helps your girl out. But as always, kinfolk, you know I love you, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.